They built 100 houses on my land and didn't even bother to ask if I owned it. That's how this entire nightmare began. One random Tuesday morning, I opened a letter from an HOA I had never heard of, Cedar Ridge Hills Community Association, politely informing me that I needed to stop interfering with their neighborhood. I almost laughed until I saw the address. It was my grandfather's 80-acre property in Jefferson County, Colorado. The land he left to me. The land I hadn't touched in years but never sold. The land an entire HOA now claimed as theirs. But the real punch in the gut. They proudly stated they had already developed the area into a 100-home suburban community, with roads, parks, streetlights, and families living in houses built on property that still legally belonged to me. Imagine waking up to discover not a fence, not a shed, not a driveway, but an entire neighborhood squatting on your land. And trust me, the confrontation that followed was even worse. Before we get into the chaos, drop your location and local time in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this unbelievable story. I grew up believing my grandfather's land in Jefferson County was untouchable, almost sacred. 80 acres of open sky, ponderosa pines, and the quiet kind of silence you only get in the Rockies. When he passed, he never pressured me to move back or build something or turn it into a business. He just made me promise one thing: keep it in the family, John. Land is the one thing they're not making any more of. I held on to that promise for more than 2 decades, though not in the way he intended. Truth is, life swept me away. I moved to Texas for school, then to Seattle for work. Every year I told myself I'd go back, maybe build a cabin, maybe restore the old trail he used to walk, but every year another excuse popped up. Promotions, deadlines, cross-country relocations, until eventually his land became more of a memory than a responsibility. But even in the busiest moments of my life, the promise stayed tucked somewhere in the back of my mind. It felt safe, secure, mine, which is why standing there in my kitchen rereading that letter from Cedar Ridge Hills HOA felt like my stomach had dropped straight through the floor. I kept checking the date, the envelope, the letterhead as if it might magically turn into spam or some bureaucratic mistake. But no, every line of text punched harder than the last. They said they legally acquired the Mercer Ridge property in 2011. They said they had maintained and improved the land in accordance with county development standards. They said I needed to cease harassment toward residents and board members immediately. Harassment I didn't even know this HOA existed until 5 minutes earlier. And then it came the line that turned my confusion into white-hot anger. We request that you refrain from impersonating the former landowner or contacting residents. Such actions may result in legal consequences. Former landowner. They actually wrote that out. I remember whispering the words under my breath, like if I said them slowly enough the insanity might fade. Former landowner. I set the letter down and walked around my kitchen just to burn off the energy. My hands were shaking. I hadn't been to the property since early 2003, but I never sold it, never transferred it, never even received an offer for it. Nothing about that land had changed on my end. So how in the world could an HOA, some random suburban association, claim they owned it? I pulled out my file box, the one with birth certificates, tax documents, old insurance papers, all the boring grown-up stuff I rarely touched. And right there, tucked neatly in a plastic sleeve, was the warranty deed my grandfather left me. His signature, the county seal, the date. My name listed in big, clean typeface as the sole heir. Everything was intact. Everything was legal. Everything was mine. That gave me a little relief, until the next thought hit. If they actually built 100 homes on that land, if they paved it over and sold houses and moved families onto it, then this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an error. This was premeditated, deliberate, outrageous theft. Not a shed, not some hunting cabin or RV, a full suburban development, on land they did not own. I called my attorney back in Seattle first just to sanity check the situation. His reaction was immediate and unfiltered. "John, this is way beyond my lane. You need a Colorado land use lawyer immediately. This is serious." That's when I dug out the old contact information from my family's attorney in Denver. He'd worked with my grandfather for years, probate county filings, water rights, all of it. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. When he answered, I explained everything: the letter, the HOA, the claim of ownership, the 100 homes. There was a brief pause on the line, and then he said very quietly, "John, I need you to forward that to me right now." So I did. 2 minutes later, I heard him mutter, "Good Lord." Then, "John, I'm going to be honest with you. Something about this is extremely off. You need to come to Colorado as soon as you can. I booked a flight for the next morning. The closer I got to Colorado, the more a strange mix of nostalgia and dread pooled in my chest. I landed at Denver International, rented a truck, and drove west toward Jefferson County. The mountains rose up in the distance, familiar enough to tug something at the back of my throat. I had spent countless summers there as a kid, helping my grandfather fix fence posts, piling firewood, skipping rocks across the creek. My childhood wasn't perfect, but those summers were. They were pure. And now apparently someone had bulldozed right over them. After meeting with my attorney, who looked like he hadn't slept since reading that letter, we drove together toward the property. He stayed mostly quiet, which didn't help my nerves. As we approached the ridge, I kept looking for landmarks, the old split-rail fence, the dirt path, the cottonwood tree by the creek. But I didn't see any of those things. Instead, I saw a sign. A big, shiny, decorative sign mounted on stacked stone pillars, "Welcome to Cedar Ridge Hills, a deed-restricted community." My truck rolled slowly past the entrance, and all I could do was stare. Rows of identical single-family homes stretched across hills that used to be open pasture. Bright siding, manicured lawns, kids' bicycles on driveways, a little park with a playground, a roundabout with a small fountain, streetlights spaced every 50 feet. It looked like every other modern Colorado suburb, except that this was supposed to be wild, untouched Mercer land. My attorney let out a low whistle. They developed the entire thing, no permits, no approval, no ownership. But there it was, an entire community. As we drove deeper, people walked dogs, jogged past, waved politely like we were just new neighbors passing through. They had no idea. They thought they lived in a perfectly legitimate neighborhood. They thought the land had always been Cedar Ridge Hills. But every foundation, every driveway, every nail hammered into every wall, it was all built on ground that still legally belonged to me. My grandfather's ground. My family's ground. Ground they took without asking. My attorney pointed at a building near the center. That must be their community office. Let's start there. I parked, stepped out, and felt something twist in my stomach as my boots hit pavement that should never have existed. Inside the building, the air smelled like new carpet and cheap coffee. A receptionist in a Cedar Ridge polo shirt smiled like everything was normal. "Hi there, are you visiting, looking to buy?" I didn't smile back. "No, I'm here because this land belongs to me." Her face froze just slightly, just enough to tell me she'd heard something about this before. "One moment, sir." She disappeared into a back room and returned with a woman who looked like she'd been summoned during a hairspray emergency. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, purple blazer. The exact image you'd expect of a suburban tyrant. "Hello," she said, arms crossed. "I'm Linda Marston, president of the Cedar Ridge Hills HOA. And you are?" "I'm John Mercer," I said, "the owner of this land." Her smile vanished so fast it was almost a physical slap. "Oh, you." That tone told me everything I needed to know. They knew exactly who I was. They knew exactly what they'd done. And they were ready to fight. She stepped closer, chin raised. "This land belongs to the Cedar Ridge Hills community. Not you, not anymore. And if you don't leave right now, I will call the sheriff and report you for trespassing." My hands curled into fists. The rage in my chest felt volcanic. But I forced my voice to stay calm. "Call whoever you need to." "But this isn't over," Linda smirked. "Oh, Mr. Mercer, you have no idea how over it already is." But she was wrong. So unbelievably wrong. And soon she would find out exactly whose land she was standing on. Linda's smirk stayed frozen on her face, like she expected me to shrink, apologize, backpedal something. But instead I just stared at her long enough for the silence to make the receptionist shift uncomfortably behind her desk. My attorney Alan stepped forward. He wasn't a tall guy, but in moments like this he somehow looked 6'5". "Mrs. Marston," he said evenly, "as of this moment you are standing on land that the Jefferson County Registrar still lists under the Mercer Family Trust. If you intend to accuse my client of trespassing, I strongly suggest you reconsider." Linda's lips twitched. Her facade cracked not much, but enough to reveal a flash of panic she tried to hide behind a scoff. "This is a private community," she snapped back. "You have no authority here, neither does he." She pointed a perfectly manicured nail at me. Alan pulled a folder from his briefcase. "This," he said, "is the original warranty deed. This is the probate confirmation. This is the tax ledger. And unless you can show us your legally recorded transfer of ownership, which I assure you does not exist, you're the one trespassing on his property." For a moment, Linda didn't speak. She just glared at us, jaw tightening, nostrils flaring. Not because she was confident, no, this was something worse. It was the look of someone who knew she was caught but hadn't yet decided whether to fight or fold. Finally, she dropped her sunglasses down onto her nose and said, "You will hear from our lawyers." Then she turned and stormed toward the back office without another word. The receptionist exhaled softly, clearly relieved the tension had left the room. "I'm sorry about that," she murmured. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The anger was sitting in my chest like molten metal. Back in the truck, Alan rubbed his temples. "She knows," he muttered. "She knows the whole thing is illegal." That reaction wasn't surprise, that was fear. I looked out the windshield at the neat little houses lined up along the freshly paved street. Every home had a SUV in the driveway, a wreath on the door, a recycling bin on the curb. Families lived here. Kids played here. Dogs barked behind fences. All of it built on land they had stolen from me. "Alan," I said quietly, "how does something like this even happen? 100 homes, roads, utilities. How does that get past the county?" He sighed. "It doesn't, not without help. Bribes, forged signatures, manipulated zoning files. Something dirty is behind this. No way construction this big gets green-lighted accidentally." He wasn't wrong. We drove deeper into the neighborhood, and for every block we passed, the more surreal the whole thing became. I recognized nothing. Everything familiar from my childhood was buried under asphalt concrete and vinyl siding. The old cottonwood tree replaced by a tot lot with a plastic slide. The ridge where my grandfather and I used to sit and watch meteor showers, now a row of duplexes. The creek where I first learned to fish, redirected through an underground pipe so homeowners could have a community green space. Everywhere I looked, something was missing, something erased. And the erasure hurt more than I expected. We parked at a cul-de-sac overlooking what used to be the creek bed. A group of kids rode bikes in circles around the court. One of them slowed as he passed our truck, giving us a curious look before pedaling off again. They had no idea the ground they were riding on used to be my childhood. I swallowed hard. "This was supposed to be untouched land," I whispered. "My grandfather kept it wild for nearly 80 years. Alan looked at me sympathetically. I know. His whole philosophy was staying off the grid. He barely let the county trim the roadside weeds. And now it's a suburb," he nodded slowly. "And we're going to figure out exactly who let that happen." But figuring it out wasn't going to be simple. As we continued exploring, we noticed signs that Cedar Ridge Hills wasn't just a normal suburban development, it was something far more coordinated. The street names were all newly registered. The utilities appeared to have been connected through temporary development permits. The community center was financed by a so-called neighborhood improvement fund, which was suspiciously vague in its documentation. Someone had built this place fast, quietly, and with just enough falsified paperwork to keep questions away until now. We headed toward the northern end of the property, where the land dipped into a natural basin. That area used to be protected green space under county rules, no building allowed due to erosion risks. But now, there were brand new houses sitting right there, perched on soil that wasn't meant to hold them. Fresh retaining walls looked like they'd been poured last month. "Jesus," Alan murmured. "Whoever built here didn't just break the law. They ignored geological restrictions. This is dangerous." When he said dangerous, we both turned at the same time. A white pickup with construction logos we didn't recognize was rolling slowly down the street toward us. 2 men sat in the cab staring. Not friendly stares, more like territorial inspections. Alan leaned slightly forward in his seat. "John," he said under his breath, "don't get out yet." The truck stopped behind us. One of the men stepped out, jeans, dusty construction vest, unzipped sunglasses reflecting everything except emotion. He walked up to my window and tapped it with a knuckle. "Great." I lowered it halfway. "Something I can help you with?" The man didn't smile. "This is an active development area," he said. "No unauthorized vehicles allowed." I raised an eyebrow. "This is my property." The second man got out of the pickup, walking closer. "We were told nobody named Mercer has anything to do with this land," he said. "Maybe you should leave before there's confusion." Confusion. That was their euphemism for intimidation. Alan clicked on the voice recorder on his phone. "Gentlemen," he said in his most lawyerly tone, "we are conducting a lawful property assessment. You are interfering with an ongoing legal matter. Please step back." The first man sneered slightly. "You lawyers always think you know everything, don't you?" I could feel this heading somewhere bad. So could Alan. He quietly said, "John, window up. Don't escalate." I began rolling the window up, not aggressively, just enough to signal we were done talking, when the man leaned forward and said through the narrowing gap, "You people have no idea what you're messing with." Then he stepped away, climbed into the truck, and the 2 of them rolled off like they owned the place. Alan let out a slow breath. That, he said, was not normal construction staff behavior. No, I said, it wasn't. As we drove away, something struck me. Every person who was actually running this neighborhood, the HOA president, the so-called developers, the construction workers, acted like they weren't afraid of consequences. That only happens when someone thinks they're protected. Alan, I said, tightening my grip on the steering wheel, we're not just dealing with a rogue HOA. He nodded grimly. No, we're dealing with a coordinated land grab. And the worst part, I added, what they think they can still win. Alan turned to me. And can they? I looked out at the rows of houses, neat, polished, bright, full of people who had no idea they were living in the middle of a crime scene. No, I said, not if I have anything to say about it. I didn't know it then, but standing in that stolen neighborhood, heart-pounding fists, clenched fury rising, was the exact moment the real war began. Alan and I didn't say a word on the drive back to his office. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy. The kind of silence that forms when both people are thinking the same thing, but neither wants to say it out loud yet. Every mile we passed through the hills of Jefferson County felt like another layer of disbelief settling into my bones. Finally, once we pulled into the parking lot and shut the truck doors behind us, Alan exhaled the way a man does right before ripping off a bandage. John, he said, unlocking the office door, you need to prepare yourself. This is not going to be a short fight. I figured, I muttered, following him inside. And it's not going to be a clean one either. That part I already knew. You don't build a whole neighborhood illegally unless you're ready to defend it illegally too. Inside his office, Alan shuffled through his drawers until he found a thick binder labeled Jefferson County Zoning, Environmental Restrictions. He flipped it open and pushed it toward me. Look at this. I scanned the highlighted paragraphs. No residential development permitted within the South Ridge Erosion Basin. I frowned. That's where they built the houses on the slope, I said. The ones with the fresh retaining walls. Alan nodded grimly. That basin was flagged after the 1997 landslide. No construction is allowed without extensive geological reinforcement, and even then it's restricted to non-habitable structures. So those homes are illegal twice. Twice, Alan scoffed. Try 5 times. He began pacing, agitation bubbling up under his normally calm demeanor. They ignored environmental rules, zoning regulations, permit procedures, tax requirements. They even faked signatures from a county planner who retired 12 years ago. That explains why everything looked rushed, I said. Almost like they were trying to finish before someone noticed. Alan stopped pacing. But here's the truly insane part: someone did notice. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? He tapped a sealed envelope on his desk. This came in while you were driving down from the airport yesterday. It's from a whistleblower at the county. A whistleblower, anonymous, Alan clarified, but someone inside the county planning office knew this development was crooked from the beginning. They've been sitting on documents they couldn't safely release until now. He slit the envelope open carefully, pulling out a stack of photocopies. My heart rate kicked up as I recognized the words permit application and rezoning request. But stamped across them in thick red letters was one word repeated over and over: denied. Every single permit Cedar Ridge Hills had applied for was denied. Some weren't even reviewed. They were sent back for missing signatures or improper documentation. But they built anyway, I whispered. Oh, they built anyway, Alan said. And then someone in the recorder's office illegally marked those permits as approved. That's a felony, John. A big one. My hands clenched around the photocopies. So someone inside the county helped them. More like several someones, Alan said darkly. This level of forgery doesn't happen with one rogue employee. It looks like a coordinated effort. They probably thought no one would check because the original landowner you was out of state and hadn't touched the property in 20 years. I let out a slow, bitter breath. They thought the land was abandoned. They thought you were, Alan corrected. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking under me. So what do? We sue, Alan said. We sue everyone. The HOA board, the development company, the contractors, and anyone in the county who knowingly approved illegal filings. But before we file anything, we need rock-solid proof. And that means... Alan looked at me with an expression that was half apology, half warning. It means we have to gather documentation, records, photos, statements. And that's going to take time. I nodded, but inside I felt the urgency pounding like a war drum. I don't want them building one more house, I said. Not one more shingle, not one more brick. Alan pulled out another stack of papers. That's the part we handle tonight. Tonight, he slid a form across the desk. An emergency injunction request. If a judge signs this, all construction on your land stops immediately. Relief washed over me so fast I almost felt dizzy. Let's get it filed. We spent the next hour compiling documentation, printing photos we took earlier, attaching copies of the deed, the rejected permits, the letter from the HOA, the whole sordid mess. When the file was nearly 3 inches thick, Alan stapled the last page and looked up at me. You ready for what? For the part where we walk into a judge's chambers and explain how an entire neighborhood magically appeared on your land. We drove to the courthouse under a sky that had turned the color of bruised steel clouds rolling over the Rockies like they were gathering for battle. Colorado sunsets used to calm me. That night, all they did was sharpen my nerves. Inside the emergency judge on rotation, Judge Harriet McKinley studied the case file with the same expression someone might use while watching a fireworks show explode indoors. After 10 minutes, she removed her glasses and said, "Mr. Mercer, this is one of the most outrageous land use violations I've ever seen." "Tell me about it," I murmured. Alan shot me a look to keep quiet, but the judge didn't seem to mind. "In 30 years on the bench," she continued, "I've seen shady developers corrupt county clerks and HOAs that think they're miniature governments. But this," she tapped the file, "this is organized fraud." She picked up her pen. "As of this moment, all construction on the property, known as Mercer Ridge, is halted. Effective immediately. Sheriff's deputies will enforce it." My breath caught. We won the first battle. But the war was far from over. The next morning, Alan and I drove back towards Cedar Ridge Hills. The sun was barely up when we reached the main entrance. But we weren't alone, not by a long shot. 3 sheriff's cruisers sat at the neighborhood gate, lights flashing. Deputies stood in a line, hands on belts, blocking the construction vehicles trying to enter. A line of cement mixers, pickup trucks, and contractors stretched down the road. And yelling at the deputies' red-faced, furious, dripping indignation was none other than Linda Marston. "You can't do this," she screamed. "We are a recognized community. This is our development. These permits were approved." One deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, the court order is clear. No construction until further notice." "My husband is the developer," Linda barked. "Do you know who we are?" The deputy didn't even blink. "Ma'am, please step back. This is harassment. This is illegal." "This is Linda," I called out, stepping out of the truck. "Good morning." Her head snapped toward me with enough force to strain a neck muscle. "You," she pointed at me like she was casting a curse. "This is your doing, correct," I said calmly. "I'd say sorry, but I'm not." She stomped toward me, heels clicking like gunshots. "You think a piece of paper is going to stop us? We are not shutting down our community because of some outdated deed you dug up." Alan stepped in between us. "Not outdated, Mrs. Marston. Binding, legally, permanently." A few residents had gathered on their porches watching the scene unfold like it was a morning drama special. I saw confusion in their eyes, fear, frustration. Some were whispering to each other. One couple clutched paperwork, probably their mortgage documents. They weren't the enemy. They were collateral damage. People who bought homes in good faith. People who had no idea they were part of an illegal development. Linda, however, was the enemy. And she knew her empire was starting to crack. "You won't win," she hissed. "We have connections. We have money. We have influence." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "And I have the truth." Her eyes narrowed to slits. "This isn't over." "No," I said, "it's just beginning." As the deputies turned construction crews away and the last cement mixer rumbled off down the road, I finally felt something I hadn't felt since the day I opened that letter control. But it wouldn't last long. Because the moment Cedar Ridge Hills realized they couldn't build their way out of this, they started fighting dirtier. And I was about to see just how far a corrupt HOA would go to keep stolen land. Even after the sheriffs cleared out the construction crews and sealed the site, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. You can sense it in the air when people who are used to getting their way suddenly lose control. They become unpredictable, desperate. Linda was the perfect example. 2 days after the injunction, while Alan and I were sifting through documents at his office, he suddenly leaned back in his chair with a grimace. "You're not going to like this," he said. "Great," I muttered. "What now?" He turned his computer screen toward me. Linda went on the local news. There she was, perfectly styled, hair blazer, ironed flat lips, pursed tragically. She sat on a news station, set as if she were the victim of some horrible injustice. And the headline beneath her was an absolute punch in the throat. "Local HOA president says, OUTOFSTATE, millionaire threatens 100 families." Linda leaned forward for dramatic effect. "This man, this stranger, has come in out of nowhere claiming he owns the land our homes are built on. It's absurd. My community has lived here for years. Children were raised here. We've worked so hard to build a safe, beautiful neighborhood, and now this Outsider is trying to destroy it. I felt my blood temperature rise at least 10 degrees. Outsider, I snapped. That's my family's land, Alan nodded sympathetically. She's spinning a narrative, painting you as a villain, Linda continued, voice trembling just enough to appear rehearsed. We're just asking for some decency. He wants to uproot entire families. For what profit, spite? Who knows? All I know is that we will fight. We will protect our homes. Protect their homes. They built those homes on stolen property. To top it off, Alan said, clicking another link, their developer Marston Development Group just filed an emergency appeal to overturn the injunction. What grounds, I asked. He gave me a look. The usual, claiming irreparable damage if construction halts. But they left out the part where the land doesn't belong to them. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. So they're doubling down. They're cornered, Alan said. Of course they're doubling down. And as if on cue, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Hello. There was a pause. Then a shaky, whispered voice. Mr. Mercer. Yes. You don't know me, the voice said. I bought one of the homes in Cedar Ridge Hills last year. I didn't know anything was wrong. But now I'm scared. People are talking. Rumors are spreading. The HOA said you're going to evict everyone. I closed my eyes. I'm not trying to evict anybody, I said. But the development was illegal. I'm fighting the people responsible, not the families who were tricked into buying. She exhaled shakily. Thank God. The board told us you were some kind of developer trying to shut the place down. Some families are terrified. Listen, I said gently. I'm going after the fraudsters, not the residents. You deserve the truth. And you deserve legal protection too. Then, can I meet with your attorney, she asked. Yes, I said. Absolutely. When I hung up, Alan nodded. That's good. Residents will matter in this case. Their testimony will be crucial. And if they turn against the HOA, Linda's power crumbles. But Linda wasn't stupid. She knew exactly how much influence she could lose if residents began hearing the truth. And that's when the harassment escalated. Not by a little, by a lot. That evening, as I returned to my hotel, I noticed something off right away. My door was slightly ajar. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to send a chill down my spine. I stepped inside carefully. Everything looked normal, until I reached the desk. There, sitting right in the center, was an envelope. No name. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 typed words, "Go home." I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. When Alan arrived after I called him, he studied the note with tight lips. Classique intimidation. Amateur beaut, concerning. These people are getting desperate, I said. And when criminals get desperate, he replied, they get sloppy or dangerous. He wasn't wrong, because the next morning I woke to find my truck covered in something. Eggs, mustard, a thick smear of mud, and the words "Leave our community" finger-painted across the windshield. Hotel security shrugged apologetically. Cameras didn't catch much. Looks like they avoided the angle. This wasn't random vandalism. This was targeted, calculated. Whoever did it knew exactly how to skirt surveillance. Alan called the sheriff, who came out, took a statement, and promised increased patrols. But we both knew what this meant. The HOA board wasn't just whispering lies anymore, they were weaponizing fear. Residents began sending Alan emails, hidden messages, photos of notices slipped under their doors. One resident wrote, "Linda said anyone talking to you will be fined for colluding with outside threats." "Is that even legal?" another wrote. "They're saying you want to bulldoze our homes. Why would they lie about that?" And another, "My husband tried to ask a question at the HOA meeting, and Linda shut him down. She said anyone supporting you would be removed from community privileges." "Community privileges," I scoffed. "What is this, a dictatorship?" Alan shook his head. "That woman has gone full tyrant, and she's panicking. The more scared she gets, the more extreme she becomes." He was right. But things were about to get much uglier. 2 nights later, while I was reviewing documents in my hotel room, I heard a loud thunk against the door. When I opened it, heart pounding, no one was in the hallway. But another envelope was on the floor. This time, the message was handwritten, crooked, angry, "Back off, or we make you." I stared at it for a long, silent moment before dialing Alan again. "Tell me the truth," I said. "How far do you think these people are willing to go?" Alan hesitated. "John, if this development goes down, so do the people who built it. We're talking fraud charges, conspiracy, maybe even racketeering. These aren't small-time violations. So, they have every incentive to intimidate you into giving up. But I'm not giving up. I know, he said. And that's why we need protection. Protection. For a land battle in America. What kind of story was I living? Alan arranged private security for me, 2 retired deputies who didn't talk much but stood like granite on either side of my hotel door. And thank God he did. Because the very next morning, one of them woke me up with a grim expression. "Mr. Mercer," he said quietly, "we found someone trying to break into your truck." My stomach sank. "Did you catch them ran off before we got close?" "But they were trying to jimmy the lock. Might have been trying to plant something. Plant something, like evidence, like drugs, a weapon, maybe worse." The security guard added, "We should move you. This place isn't safe." I wanted to argue, but the fatigue, the fury, the frustration, everything crashed together, leaving me drained. "Fine," I said. "Let's go." As we drove to a safer hotel with more security and fewer blind spots, I watched the Colorado plains roll by outside the window, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. My grandfather's land. My childhood memories. The stolen neighborhood. The intimidation, the lies, the vandalism. Linda and her cronies thought they could scare me away. They thought they could bully me like they bullied residents, contractors, maybe even county officials. But they miscalculated one very important thing. I wasn't a frightened homeowner. I wasn't a confused resident. I wasn't a guy who would fold under pressure. I was a man with 80 acres of sacred family land, land they illegally stole, built on, and exploited. And if they wanted a war, that's exactly what they were going to get. The new hotel Alan booked for me sat on the outskirts of Golden, tucked against the foothills with only one entrance road, and cameras pointed in every direction. It wasn't fancy, but it felt defensible, like the kind of place someone would think twice before trying to break into. My 2 new security guys, Tom and Ray, walked the perimeter twice before giving me the all clear. Both were former sheriff's deputies and carried the solid, stone-faced energy of men who had seen too much wrong in the world to be easily rattled. "From here forward," Tom said, "you don't walk anywhere alone. Not to the lobby. Not to the parking lot. Not to the ice machine." "I get it," I said. "No," he replied. "You don't. These people aren't just angry, they're organized. And organized people can do stupid things when cornered." He wasn't saying it to scare me. He was saying it because it was true. The next morning, Alan picked me up, and we headed straight to the Jefferson County Courthouse. We had a meeting with the county attorney, an emergency session they called, after reviewing our injunction filing. That was the first sign things were shifting. The second sign came when the county attorney, a stern woman named Monica Reeves, walked into the conference room looking like she had swallowed a mouthful of nails. She didn't bother shaking hands. "Mr. Mercer," she said briskly, "I'll be blunt. We have a corruption problem. A big one." Alan and I exchanged a glance. Monica continued. "Cedar Ridge Hills development was approved using questionable signatures. Stolen credentials. Manipulated zoning records." She slid a stack of documents across the table, printouts of emails, timestamp logs, scanned signatures. "This is internal evidence showing someone inside the county offices altered your property records to inactive status and temporarily blocked public queries." My stomach tightened. "Someone hid my land. They buried the file," she said, "digitally. Long enough for the developer to apply for permits under a different parcel number. By the time the database reverted, construction had already begun." "Jesus," I muttered. Monica massaged her temples. "We've identified 2 employees who appear to have taken bribes. One has already confessed. The other lawyered up immediately. We're expecting this to turn into a multi-agency investigation." "For how long?" I asked. She looked at me with the grim patience of someone delivering bad news they've had to rehearse. "Months. Maybe longer. Months." While 100 homes sat on my land. "So what happens now?" I asked. "We freeze everything," she said. "Every permit, every construction contract, every utility tie-in. Nothing moves until the investigation is complete." "Good," Alan said. "But we're not stopping there. My client intends to pursue civil damages." Monica nodded. "And we support you. Frankly, this entire situation is a liability nightmare for the county. The fraudulent permits, the environmental violations, it all points to criminal conspiracy." I leaned forward. "Let me ask the real question here. Who's responsible, the county employees, the developer, the HOA?" Monica hesitated. Then she said the name we already knew was coming. "Linda Marston." Alan exhaled sharply. I just stared. "We have emails," Monica went on. "Emails between Linda and a county code enforcement officer. Payments disguised as consulting fees, promises made, approvals exchanged. We're still assembling the full picture, but it's not good. For her. Or for her husband's development company, Alan added. Monica nodded. Exactly. For a brief moment I felt a flicker of something like relief. Justice wasn't just possible, it was coming. But that relief didn't last long. Because as we were wrapping up, Monica slid a final piece of paper toward me. A court motion. Filed by Marston Development Group. Alan read it first. Oh, for hell's sake, he muttered. What I asked. They're claiming adverse possession, he said. My jaw dropped. You're kidding, Alan shook his head. No, they're arguing that because they've been openly occupying the land for more than 10 years, the property should legally revert to them. That's absurd, I snapped. You can't steal land by building on it illegally, Alan agreed. And Colorado law requires 20 years for adverse possession. They don't even meet the minimum threshold. Monica's lips thinned. They know the claim is weak. It's a stalling tactic, a desperate one. Of course it was. Linda was throwing legal spaghetti at the wall, hoping anything would stick. But she had no idea I was willing to scrape every last piece of that spaghetti right off the wall and shove it back in her face. As we left the courthouse, my phone vibrated. Another unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello, a deep male voice responded. You need to stop. I instantly recognized the tone. The construction guy from before, the one with the smug attitude and cheap sunglasses. You don't want to keep pushing this, he said. You're poking at something bigger than you understand. Who is this? I asked coldly. But he ignored the question. Walk away, Mercer. Take your fancy deed and go home, or you'll regret it. He hung up. Alan frowned. What was that? Another threat, I said. Tom and Ray weren't surprised when I told them later. Expected it, Ray said. These types always escalate before they collapse. He was right. Because later that night, the real escalation happened. It was just after 11:30 p.m. I was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed reviewing documents when the fire alarm suddenly blared through the hallway, shrill and echoing. I jumped up, grabbing my shoes. Within seconds, Tom was pounding on the door. Mr. Mercer outside. Now. Ray was already escorting hotel guests down the stairwell as smoke began creeping under doors, thin at first, then thicker. What happened? I shouted. Small fire on the first floor, Tom said. Stay close. But as we reached the lobby, I saw the truth. A trash bin near the service entrance was ablaze. The flames weren't huge, but they were intentional. Arson. Someone had set a fire in the hotel where I was staying. My heart pounded as firefighters extinguished it quickly. The chief approached us. Fire was started with an accelerant. Someone did this on purpose. I felt my jaw tighten. That was it. No more tolerating harassment. No more intimidation. No more threats whispered over burner phones. This wasn't just a land dispute anymore. This was a criminal operation trying to scare me into giving up. And they had just made a mistake big enough to backfire spectacularly. The next morning, Alan and I met with Detective Harrison from the Jeffco Sheriff's Department, a tall, hawk-eyed man with a no-nonsense attitude. Mr. Mercer, he said, flipping open a notebook, I'm going to be direct. We believe the individuals involved in this development are tied to larger financial crimes, money laundering, tax fraud, possibly wire fraud. That was new. Money laundering properties built illegally, sold quickly, cash transactions funneled through shell companies, Harrison explained. It's a pattern we've been tracking for a while. Your case might be the thread that unravels everything. He leaned closer. And the people behind this, they don't want that thread pulled. I swallowed hard. So what now? Now, he said, we start treating this like what it is, a criminal conspiracy. And you're not backing down. No, I said firmly. I'm not, Good Harrison replied. Because neither are we. For the first time since this insane ordeal started, I felt something solid beneath my feet again. Support. Truth. Momentum. The HOA wanted a war, fine. But they were about to learn something very important. They picked the wrong guy to steal land from, and they picked the worst possible person to threaten, because I was done reacting. Now I was coming for them. All of them. Detective Harrison didn't waste any time. Before Alan and I could even settle into our chairs, he began laying out a plan as if he'd been preparing for this moment long before we ever walked into his office. Here's what we know, he said, flipping open a folder thick with photographs and reports. Cedar Ridge Hills wasn't built overnight. This wasn't sloppy incompetence. This was coordinated, organized, funded, and intentionally hidden. He tapped a satellite photo of my land, my former land as Linda would have put it, with bright red circles highlighting clusters of homes. Each of these construction phases lines up with odd, unexplained movements of money through Marston Development Group. They filed multiple LLCs with near-identical names, classic laundering method, Alan leaned forward. You think Linda's husband was running a fraud ring through the development, not just him, Harrison said. We suspect at least 3 people inside the county planning office helped greenlight this mess. And I guarantee the HOA board members weren't innocent bystanders. I felt my jaw tighten. So the HOA wasn't just covering illegal development, they were participating in it, Harrison nodded, knowingly. They collected community development fees from residents that never went toward improvements. They funneled it through dummy accounts. A portion kicked back to the developer. A portion used to pay off county employees. A portion, he paused, then added, is unaccounted for. What does that mean? I asked. It means someone stole it. Linda, most likely. My fists curled. Linda had the audacity to paint herself as a martyr on live TV, while behind the scenes she was stealing from her own residents. Unbelievable. So what do we do now? I asked. Harrison closed the folder with a decisive thud. We build a case strong enough to bring the entire operation down. But for that we need evidence, paper trails, testimony, records of communication, and we need residents willing to talk. I almost laughed bitterly. Most of them are terrified of Linda. She runs that neighborhood like a Roman emperor. Harrison smirked slightly. Well, emperors fall, and when they do, the people who are afraid of them usually talk the loudest. He wasn't wrong. Because 30 minutes later, we got our first unexpected ally. As Alan and I stepped outside the sheriff's office, a woman hurried across the parking lot toward us, mid-30s, brown hair glasses clutching a folder to her chest like a lifeline. Mr. Mercer, she called out nervously. Yes, I said. She stopped a few feet away, wide-eyed and breathless. I was told you might be here. My name is Rebecca Kane. I live in Cedar Ridge Hills, and I think I can help you. Alan shot me a quick look of careful, but I stepped forward. What kind of help? I asked. Rebecca opened her folder and pulled out a stack of HOA meeting, printouts, invoices, and several copies of email exchanges. At the top of one page was a familiar signature, Linda Marston. This, Rebecca said quietly, is proof that the HOA board knew the development was illegal. Alan's eyebrows shot up. How do you know that? Because, she said, swallowing hard, I was the HOA secretary until Linda forced me to resign. She didn't want me seeing the finances anymore. Why not? I asked. She laughed, not humorously, but with a bitterness that told a story all on its own, because I asked too many questions. She handed Alan an email thread that made his eyes go wide. Linda, do not include the cost of the Marston consulting fees in the financial summary. Board members don't need to see everything. Another email from Linda, residents don't need to know about the permit delays. If they ask questions, tell them it's seasonal backlog. We only need to stay ahead long enough to secure Phase 3 funding. A third email from the developer's office. Once the county data is adjusted, we're clear to proceed. Payment confirmed. Adjusted. Not approved. Adjusted. My pulse hammered. This was huge. How long have you had these? I asked Rebecca. I kept backups, she said. I didn't trust Linda. I thought something was off. You were right, Alan said. And you probably just saved this entire case. Rebecca's expression softened slightly, then tightened with fear. But you can't let Linda know I gave you this. She'll come after me. She's not stable, Mr. Mercer. You've seen how she is. I nodded. I won't put you at risk, but your testimony could help protect the whole neighborhood. I know, she whispered, and that's why I'm here. People are scared. They're angry. Everyone feels trapped. But if you can take her down, we'll back you. It was the first real sign of hope I'd had since this nightmare began. After Rebecca left, Alan clapped me on the shoulder. That woman is brave, he said. And she just handed us a smoking gun. A whole arsenal of them, I muttered. We returned to Alan's office to analyze the documents. With every page we scanned, it became clearer that what we were dealing with wasn't just fraud. It was embezzlement, conspiracy, and deliberate deception on a scale much larger than anyone had guessed. As we worked, Alan said, these emails show Linda knowingly hid the illegal status of the development from both residents and board members. Combined with the county corruption, this is turning into something big enough for federal involvement. FBI, I asked. Likely. Especially if the money laundering angle holds. I'd be lying if I said that didn't feel good, I said, seeing her empire crumble. Alan gave me a careful look. Revenge is one thing, John. Justice is another. Stay focused on the right one. I nodded, though. Deep down, I wasn't sure which one was driving me harder anymore. But the day wasn't done with surprises. Around 4 p.m., As Alan and I wrapped up scanning the last of Rebecca's documents, Tom called. "You're not at the hotel, right?" he asked. "No. Why good?" "Because someone just tried to get into your room again." Security caught them on camera, but they kept their face covered. A chill crawled under my skin. "Did they leave anything?" "No. But they tested the lock with some kind of device. Like they were trying to trigger it open electronically." "That's not normal," Alan said, overhearing. Tom continued, "We're moving you again, somewhere more secure." "How many times are we going to have to do this?" I asked. "As many as it takes," Tom said simply. Alan hung up and rubbed his temples. "These people are acting like cornered animals. And cornered animals do stupid, dangerous things." He was right, because the next escalation made everything before it looked tame. Later that night, after relocating to a third hotel, this one a secure suite downtown, Tom insisted we review the footage from earlier, and that's when we saw it. The person attempting to break into my room wasn't just any random stranger. They were wearing a Cedar Ridge Hills maintenance vest. I felt the air leave my lungs. "That's one of Linda's people," I said. Tom nodded. "And that tells us two things. One, they're desperate, and two, they're willing to break the law directly now." I stared at the screen, anger hardening inside me like cooling steel. "She thinks this land is her kingdom," I said. "And I'm the invader." Alan shook his head. "No. You're the rightful owner who just walked into her castle and turned on the lights." He was right. Linda wasn't fighting for land anymore. She was fighting for survival. But little did she know, her downfall had already begun, because the moment Rebecca handed us those emails, the tide shifted. The next morning, Harrison called with the best news yet. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "we're issuing warrants." I straightened. "For who?" "For the county employees who falsified your property records, for the developer's financial officer, and for several members of the HOA board." "And Linda?" I asked. Harrison hesitated for just a moment, and that hesitation said everything. "Yes," he finally said. "Linda, too." I closed my eyes. For the first time since that cursed letter arrived in my mailbox, I felt like I could breathe again. But the real battle, the one that would decide the fate of the entire neighborhood, was still ahead. Because once the arrests began, Cedar Ridge Hills would erupt. And Linda, she wasn't the type to go quietly. The first warrant dropped at sunrise. Detective Harrison called me at 6 in the morning, his voice sounding far more awake than anyone should be at that hour. "It's starting," he said. "You might want to get dressed." I didn't need more than that. Within minutes, Tom and Ray were pulling the vehicle around, and we were headed straight for Jefferson County. The early morning sky was still dim. Colorado's kind of quiet, where the air feels crisp and the sun hasn't quite decided if it wants to rise. By the time we reached Cedar Ridge, Hill's sheriff's cruisers were already scattered around the entrance like chess pieces, placed in perfect formation. Blue and red lights flashed across the neighborhood sign, giving it an eerie glow. "Welcome to Cedar Ridge Hills, a deed-restricted community." That sign suddenly felt like a giant cosmic joke. Residents stood in clusters along the sidewalks, still in pajamas, robe belts tied loosely, coffee mugs clutched like emotional support totems. Word had spread fast because everyone's eyes were glued to a single house, Linda Marston's. It was a 2-story craftsman with immaculate landscaping and 2 ceramic lion statues on the walkway, because of course it was. And standing on the porch, wrapped in a satin robe, hair undone, face contorted in disbelief, was Linda herself. 2 deputies stood at her door, one holding a stack of paperwork, the other stepping forward. "Mrs. Marston," he said loudly enough for half the neighborhood to hear, "you are under arrest for charges including fraud, obstruction, falsifying documents, and conspiracy to commit unlawful development." A ripple spread through the crowd, some gasps, some whispers, one audible, "I knew it." Linda's face turned a blotchy shade of red. "This is outrageous," she screamed. "Do you know who I am? I'm the president of this community." The deputy replied, with the most beautifully flat tone I had ever heard. "Not anymore, ma'am." She lunged forward, finger shaking. "This is his doing." She jabbed toward the street toward me, where I stood beside Tom and Ray. All eyes turned in my direction. A few of the residents looked confused. Some looked angry, but more than a few looked relieved. Mr. Mercer, Linda spat. "You think you've won. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I stepped forward just enough for my voice to carry. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," I said calmly. "And so does the judge, and the sheriff's office, and soon the federal government." Linda's jaw dropped. Then she snapped. "You arrogant little." She tried to shove past the deputies, but they restrained her with practiced ease and guided her down the porch steps. Her robe flared out wildly as she kicked and shouted. Let go of me, this is my community, mine. A few residents shuffled backward as she was escorted toward the cruiser. One older man muttered, "Tell that to the judge lady," before sipping his coffee. As Linda was handcuffed and lowered into the back seat, she screamed one final unhinged battle cry, "This isn't over." But it was the tone of someone who already knew she'd lost. The cruiser door slammed, and just like that, the Queen of Cedar Ridge Hills was dethroned. But she wasn't the only one. Across the neighborhood, sheriff's deputies began heading to other homes, board members, the HOA treasurer, even the community's compliance officer. One by one, the dominoes fell. Alan arrived at the entrance, stepping out of his car with an expression somewhere between concern and satisfaction. "You're witnessing the collapse of an empire," he said quietly. "And not a minute too soon," I replied. We watched as the treasurer's husband shouted obscenities from their driveway, while deputies escorted her away. Another board member tried to slam the door on the deputies, but was forced to open it when they threatened entry. A third just burst into tears and surrendered without resistance. Residents stood frozen in shock or whispered among themselves like they were piecing together the truth for the first time. One woman approached me cautiously. "You're the real owner, aren't you?" "Yes," I said. "This land was my grandfather's, then mine. It never belonged to the HOA." She sighed in relief. I knew something was off. The fees kept going up. The board never showed receipts. My husband kept asking questions, and they fined us for disrupting community harmony. "That's illegal," Alan said. She nodded. "We figured. Thank you for fighting this." Her words hit deeper than I expected. For months, I'd been consumed by anger, fueled by the belief that the entire neighborhood was against me. But now, standing here, I realized most of these people were victims too. Victims of Linda. Victims of lies. Victims of a development built on fraud. Detective Harrison walked up to us, hands in his pockets. "You picked a hell of a day to show up," he said. "We weren't going to miss it," I replied. "We're executing 8 arrests total," Harrison continued. "That's just the beginning. Once we pull their financial records, more charges will follow." "What about the developer?" Alan asked. Linda's husband Harrison smirked. "Oh, he didn't get far. We picked him up at the airport trying to board a flight to Nevada. Funny thing, someone tipped us off he was about to run. I wondered who. A resident, a scared board member, someone inside the county. Didn't matter. He was caught." "And the residents?" I asked. Harrison's expression softened. "They'll need answers. And reassurance. They're scared, John. Many of them put their life savings into homes built illegally. They don't know what happens next." He was right. For a moment, I stared at the rows of homes, porches with flower pots, mailboxes lined up perfectly, yards trimmed neatly. I didn't want these families to suffer. They didn't pour concrete illegally. They didn't forge signatures. They didn't bribe county employees. They bought homes in good faith, built lives here, made memories. They deserved stability, not punishment. I took a deep breath. "Get the residents together," I said. "I want to talk to them." Word spread fast. Within half an hour, dozens of homeowners gathered in the park at the center of the development. Some hugged their kids, some clutched coffee cups, some crossed their arms defensively, but all of them waited. I stepped onto one of the picnic tables so they could see me clearly. Alan stood beside me, silent but steady. I cleared my throat. "My name is John Mercer," I began, "and I'm the legal owner of this land. My grandfather left it to me. It's been in my family for almost a century." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I want you to hear this directly from me. I am not here to evict you. I am not here to destroy your homes. You were deceived by people who abused your trust. The ones responsible have been arrested. You are not." Faces softened, shoulders relaxed. "What happens next will take time," I said. "Investigations, court decisions, property reassessments. But I promise you something right now. I will work with the county, the sheriff's department, and legal teams to stabilize your ownership. I want this community to survive legally safely and without corruption." A woman near the front raised her hand. "So, we're not losing our homes." "No," I said firmly. "You deserve security, and I intend to provide it." Some people began to cry. Others clapped. A few approached with cautious gratitude. One man stepped forward, tall, strong, build beard flecked with gray. He extended his hand. "My name's Carlos," he said. I didn't know who to believe. But, thank you, seriously. This neighborhood needed someone like you a long time ago. I shook his hand. "Thank you, and I'm not going anywhere." As residents slowly dispersed relief, spreading through them like sunlight, Alan leaned toward me. You handled that well, he said. I exhaled. It was the right thing to do. He clasped my shoulder. You're about to be in an unusual position, John. What do you mean? You just became the central figure in a legal earthquake. And when the dust settles, you're not just getting your land back. I frowned. What else am I getting? Alan smiled the way a man does when he knows a twist is coming. John, you might end up owning the entire neighborhood. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because in that moment, surrounded by 100 illegally built houses on my grandfather's land, I realized something. The HOA had built themselves a kingdom, and I was about to become its king. The revelation hung in the air long after Alan said it. Owning the entire neighborhood, 100 homes, miles of roads, utility lines, parks. It sounded absurd, like something out of a movie where the protagonist stumbles into power he never asked for. But the longer I stared at the rows of houses lining the cul-de-sacs, the more the reality sank in. Every board member arrested, every developer detained, every fraudulent permit revoked. There was no legal owner left, except me. I wasn't just fighting to reclaim what was mine anymore. I was standing at the threshold of inheriting a suburban empire that had been built illegally on my land, and with that weight came responsibility. Responsibility I wasn't sure I wanted, but would accept nonetheless. After the arrests, Cedar Ridge Hills looked like a shaken anthill. Residents wandered in small groups, whispering, comparing rumors, clutching documents and mortgages that suddenly felt fragile in their hands. Kids rode scooters without understanding why every adult looked like they'd seen a ghost. Carlos, the man who shook my hand earlier, approached again with a few neighbors. John, he said, people trust you, but they're scared. They want to know what comes next. I nodded slowly. I know. And I'll tell them the truth as soon as I know it myself. A woman stepped forward, Rebecca Kane, the former HOA secretary who'd risked everything to bring me evidence. You should hold a town meeting, she said. Not like Linda's shouting sessions. A real meeting. Let people ask questions. Let them understand what's happening. It'll stop panic before it starts. She was right. These people had been lied to, manipulated, bullied. They needed transparency. Tonight, I said, at the community center. Rebecca's face softened with relief. I'll help gather folks. As she walked away, Alan crossed his arms. A town meeting, huh? Brave move. Necessary, I said. And risky, he added. You're about to face a crowd of 100 families whose lives just imploded. Then I'll face them, I said. They deserve answers. We spent the next few hours preparing. Alan and I went over the legal implications, what I could promise, what I couldn't, where the county stood, what the next steps were. I practiced explaining complicated bureaucracy in simple language. The truth needed to be delivered clearly, without sugarcoating or panic. By 6:30 p.m., the community center parking lot was overflowing. Cars lined both sides of the street. People filed inside, clutching notebooks, holding spouses' hands, whispering anxiously. The auditorium-style room was packed. It smelled like fear and stale coffee. I stepped behind the podium. 100 pairs of eyes locked onto me. Alan stood behind my shoulder. Tom and Ray positioned themselves by each exit, vigilant as ever. I took a deep breath. Thank you for coming, I began. I know today has been overwhelming, confusing, even frightening. A few heads nodded. Others stared blankly, unsure what to expect. What happened this morning was not your fault, I continued. You did nothing wrong. You bought homes in good faith. You believed the HOA and developer were legitimate, and you were lied to. A ripple of tension ran through the room. The county's investigation has uncovered years of falsified records, bribery, and illegal development. Arrests have been made. More are coming. A woman in the front row raised her hand. What does this mean for our mortgages, our deeds? Are we going to lose everything? Her voice cracked at the end. She wasn't angry, she was terrified, which made my next words even more important. No, I said firmly. You're not losing your homes. Not as long as I have anything to say about it. A collective exhale swept through the room. But I added the legal status of the land itself is being corrected, which means all structures built here fall under my ownership because they were built illegally on land that still legally belonged to my family. Gasps. Whispers. A nervous laugh from someone in the back. I held up a hand. That does not mean I'm taking your homes away. It means we have to rebuild the legal framework of this community correctly, ethically, transparently. Carlos stood up. So what are you proposing? I looked out across the crowd, parents, retirees, young couples, veterans, single mothers, good people who had been duped by Linda's greed. I propose, I said, that we fix this community together. Silence followed. I continued. I am forming a new entity, Mercer Ridge Holdings. Through that entity, I will become the legal steward of this land and all structures on it. But I don't want to be your landlord. I want to transition ownership back to the residents properly, with real deeds, real titles, and real legal protection. A murmur of cautious hope spread through the room. This will involve negotiations with banks, the county, and state agencies. It will take time, but it is possible, and I am committed to doing it. Someone shouted from the back, "So no bulldozers, no evictions." I shook my head. No bulldozers, no evictions. No one is losing the roof over their head. A man in the middle row raised his voice. "What about the HOA? What happens now, Cedar Ridge Hills? HOA," I said, "is dissolved. Permanently. It can no longer operate legally." A wave of applause erupted, a loud, cathartic, emotional release. I allowed it to continue. These people needed the victory. After a minute, I raised a hand again. That said, we do need some kind of community structure to maintain shared spaces. Just not a dictatorship like before. I'll work with volunteers to set up a temporary resident committee. You'll elect your leaders. Not me. Not a board obsessed with power. Someone near the front laughed bitterly and said, "Anyone but Linda." A few people chuckled. The tension eased a little. "How long will the process take?" a man asked. "Months," I admitted. "Maybe longer. But I'll be here every step of the way." "And what about Linda?" another voice asked. "Is she going to jail?" Detective Harrison, who'd slipped in quietly, stepped forward. "We can't discuss details of an active criminal case," he said, "but I can say this: there will be accountability." Cheers erupted from every corner of the room. I waited until it died down, and then spoke the final words I knew this community needed most. "You are not my enemies. You never were. You are victims of a fraud scheme that exploited your trust. My goal, our goal, is to make this right. And together we can build something better than what Linda ever pretended to offer. A standing ovation. Not a half-hearted one. A full, unanimous, thunderous one. For the first time, these people weren't afraid of me. They were counting on me. After the meeting, residents lined up to shake my hand, thank me, reassure me they had my back. Some apologized for believing Linda's lies. Others offered help, skills, contacts, time. One elderly woman pressed my hand between both of hers. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said softly. I swallowed hard. "Thank you." As the crowd finally dispersed and the room emptied, Alan approached with a weary smile. "You handled that like a leader." "I'm not trying to be a leader," I said. "Doesn't matter," he replied. "You are one now." I stepped outside into the cool Colorado night. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Lights glowed softly from windows. Dogs barked faintly in the distance. Families were tucking kids into bed. This place wasn't a fraud. The people in it weren't a scam. Only the ones who built it were. Alan stood next to me. "You ready for the next phase?" he asked. "What's the next phase?" I replied. He smiled. "John, now we rebuild a community, and you rebuild an entire neighborhood from the ground up legally." I looked out across the valley. 100 homes stood silently on the land my grandfather left me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt in control. I felt responsible, I felt determined, but more than anything I felt ready. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a storm that shifted directions every day. Some mornings brought victories. Others brought complications that made me wonder if the mountain of legal work would ever stop growing. But the most surprising part, the residents, the same people who once saw me as a threat, were becoming allies faster than I ever expected. The morning after the town hall, I woke to dozens of emails, offers to help, questions about what to expect, even invitations to dinner from families who wanted to show their gratitude. I politely declined the dinners for now, but the support mattered more than they knew. Alan and I spent the next 2 days meeting with county officials, bank representatives, and attorneys. We needed a concrete plan before residents started getting nervous again. On the third morning, Alan spread a set of documents across the conference table. "John, this is our roadmap," he said. "This is how you transition the neighborhood back to its residents." I scanned the plan. Step 1, establish Mercer Ridge Holdings as temporary legal owner. Step 2, freeze any liens filed under fraudulent HOA authority. Step 3, audit every home's construction compliance and safety status. Step 4, work with banks to rewrite mortgages under corrected property titles. Step 5, offer residents the opportunity to purchase their lot titles at minimal cost. Step 6, dissolve remaining financial ties to Marston Development. Minimal cost, I asked. Alan nodded. Legally, you could charge market rate or even premium rate. Nobody would stop you. But morally, after what they've been through, I exhaled. No, I'm not here to profit off victims. They get their titles for $1, just enough to make the transfer valid. Alan smiled. I knew you'd say that, but the good news came with a harsh counterweight. There's something else, he said, tapping a separate stack of documents. Inspection results came back. That fast, they prioritized it. Given the criminal investigation, they had teams working around the clock. He slid the report toward me. I skimmed it. My stomach twisted. Half the retaining walls weren't up to code. Several homes were built on unstable soil near the erosion basin. The drainage system wasn't completed. Electrical panels in 17 houses used substandard wiring. 2 roads were incorrectly graded and prone to collapse. And then the worst part, an entire row of homes on the West Ridge sat partially over an underground water channel, a channel that could undermine the soil beneath them over time. Are they safe? I asked. Alan hesitated. For now, yes. For the long term, not unless there's reinforcement. How much reinforcement? He took a breath. At least $3 million worth. I sank into my chair. Jesus. And the county isn't paying for that, Alan shook his head. The county didn't build illegally. The developer did. And Marston Development is bankrupt the second the criminal charges hit. The HOA doesn't exist. The board members don't have the money. And the residents, I said quietly. Already struggling, Alan said. Many wiped out their savings to buy here. They can't take on repair costs this big. I closed the report slowly. So it falls to me. Alan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I rubbed my face thinking. 80 acres of illegal construction. 100 homes built on my land. And now I was inheriting the problems the criminals left behind. But the math was simple. Either I let these families suffer or I fix the mess Linda created. My jaw tightened. All right, I said. We stabilize everything. All repairs, reinforcements, whatever it takes. Alan blinked. John, do you realize how much that will cost you? Yeah, I said. And I don't care. He sat back studying me with a strange, almost proud expression. You're doing something extraordinary, he said. Most landowners would have walked away and let the court bulldoze everything. I shook my head. That land was my grandfather's pride. The people living on it now deserve security, stability, a home that won't collapse in 10 years. Alan nodded. Then, let's do it. Over the next week, we began rolling out the stabilization plan. Engineers surveyed the erosion basin. Geologists mapped out reinforcement strategies. Construction firms submitted bids. Banks agreed to freeze payments until titles were corrected. Residents formed volunteer committees to help coordinate communication. And through it all, I was there every day, answering questions, signing paperwork, walking lots with inspectors, and trying to put out fires before they sparked panic. But the biggest fire was still coming. Because Linda, even from jail, couldn't keep her mouth shut. On the 8th day, as I was reviewing soil reinforcement plans with the engineering team, Alan rushed in holding his phone. You need to see this. He pulled up a video, a shaky recording inside the county courthouse as Linda was escorted in for her preliminary hearing. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. And then Linda turned toward one camera, her face twisted with venom, and said, "This entire thing is a setup. He's stealing the community. He wants the homes. He wants the land. He wants control. Don't let him." The video cut off as deputies pulled her inside. I rubbed my temples. So she's still trying to spin it. Alan nodded. She's telling everyone you orchestrated this to take over the neighborhood, that you bribed the county, that you faked evidence. I laughed bitterly. Faked evidence. She left a trail of emails so sloppy a first-year law student could prosecute her. That doesn't matter, Alan said. Fear talks louder than facts. So what do? He straightened his tie. We tell the truth before she weaponizes the lie. That afternoon we held a press conference. Not flashy, just a podium outside the county building. Reporters gathered with microphones extended like spears. I stepped forward. Good afternoon. My name is John Mercer. I am the legal owner of the land where Cedar Ridge Hills was built. Until recently, I had no idea that an HOA and developer illegally constructed a neighborhood here without permits, without approval, and without my knowledge. Cameras clicked. Pens scratched. Let me be clear, the residents are not at fault. They were deceived. And I am working closely with the county legal teams and engineering experts to stabilize the homes, correct the titles, and protect every family living there. Someone shouted, "Are you trying to take ownership of their homes?" No, I said firmly. I'm trying to return ownership to the residents legally. But before we can do that, we must correct the illegal foundation the previous HOA created. Another reporter asked, "What do you say to accusations made by former HOA President Linda Marston that you orchestrated this situation for your own gain?" I looked directly into the cameras. "I say this, if I wanted to profit from these homes, I would bulldoze them, resell the land, and walk away rich. Instead, I'm spending millions of my own money to reinforce their foundations and ensure families keep their homes. That is the opposite of greed." The crowd went quiet. A few reporters nodded. "This is not a land grab," I said. "This is damage control after a criminal organization tried to steal my family's legacy and ruin hundreds of lives." Alan stepped beside me as I concluded. "And we will fix this together." The press conference spread quickly online. The tone shifted. Most media outlets praised the effort. Residents expressed relief. Volunteers increased. A GoFundMe even launched, though I funded the majority myself. The storm was finally shifting, but the biggest moment came 3 weeks later. I received a call from Monica, the county attorney. "John," she said, "the judge has issued a ruling." "On what?" "On ownership." My breath caught. She continued, "You have been declared the lawful, temporary owner of every structure built on your land, and you are authorized to distribute ownership to residents once titles are corrected." I swallowed hard. "And the HOA?" I asked quietly. "Officially dissolved. Forever. All authority revoked. And Linda remains in custody awaiting trial. She will face multiple felony charges." I closed my eyes. This was it. The final confirmation. The HOA was gone. The fraudsters were finished. The land was legally mine again, and soon the homes would be returned to the people who lived in them. The chapter was finally closing. But standing there, phone in hand, looking out at the sprawling, illegally built neighborhood that had become my responsibility, I realized something unexpected. This wasn't just justice. This was a new beginning. For me, for the land, for the families who called it home, and strangely beautifully, for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere too. When I look back on everything, the intimidation, the threats, the corruption, the arrests, it reminds me of one simple truth: doing the right thing is rarely the easy thing, but it's always worth it. My grandfather used to tell me that land isn't just dirt and grass, it's responsibility. And standing up for what's right, even when you stand alone, can change the lives of everyone around you. This journey wasn't just about reclaiming a property. It was about protecting families who were lied to, rebuilding trust, and proving that justice can win even against an entire corrupt HOA. So here's my question for you. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have fought back or walked away? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if you want more unbelievable HOA stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.